Today we meet a woman who has been at NUH since the age of 18, where she started her nurse training back in 1992. I've aged her now. When her daughter nearly died in ED right here in QMC, Lisa saw the power of NUH care from the other side and actually was inspired to do the role she's doing today here in the Children's Hospital. I am welcoming to Don't Say the Q Word lead clinical nurse specialist in children's allergy, Lisa Clark, and also her colleague and the woman who cared for Lisa's children, Debra Forster, children's respiratory and community nurse. Hello to both of you. Welcome to Don't Say the Q Word. Lisa, this is your story, but I know Debra's played a massive part in it, which is why you're both here today. So let's go back to not quite the beginning. You'd been at NUH for quite a few years by this point.
Yeah. I think it was I've been in NUH. So I worked in neonatal intensive care for about 11 years. I think we're going sort of 3 or 4 years before that, before I became involved with the paediatric allergy side of things. My children sort of were a bit of trouble right from the beginning, really, was one thing or another. And my son came first of all and had respiratory issues, sort of viral-induced wheeze and bronchiolitis and things like that. But then he also developed food allergy. And then it turned out that he was the easy one, because when the second one came along, her allergies were a lot worse. So she was then diagnosed with milk allergy at 9-10 months of age. And then had her first, and her first reaction was pretty bad, actually. She did have some wheezing initially, but then we were told it wouldn't be so bad, but things got worse, unfortunately, as she got older. So my sort of involvement with paediatric allergy from the other side sort of went on from there, really.
And actually, interestingly, with both your son and your daughter, when they were receiving their initial allergy care, it was actually in adults.
Yes, it was, yes. So they were seen in clinic by Professor Powell. So my son was obviously seen first when we'd only got him. And he was diagnosed with pea allergy, which was very unusual at the time. We actually see a lot of children now with legume allergy, but he was allergic to peas and lentils, as well as egg. And he's outgrown the egg allergy as he got older. The advice we were given around that time was completely different to what we would say now. We avoided lots of allergens then for him for quite a number of years. So then when he was seen years later, we had to do a lot of testing to make sure he could still tolerate all those things. It's totally the opposite of what we would say now.
So when you say it's the opposite now, it's actually trying to
keep their diet as wide as possible, and you only avoid the things that you're truly allergic to. So we try and widen children's diet as much as we possibly can, because when you avoid things, you're more likely to become allergic to them, and we know that now. But my son's 28, so this was some time ago. They also both had eczema, so they were both seen at some time or other in dermatology. They've both been seen. I think actually, I'm not sure my daughter was ever seen in respiratory, but my son certainly was. So they've done the rounds, as well as the usual sort of children's ED visits with banged heads and things like that. But there was a period where I seemed to be coming all the time, and even when I was on annual leave, I'd end up here at some point with one of them with something. My son was seen, I think, in adult allergy only initially, and then not seen for a good few years until my daughter came along. And then it became clear from a sort of about 9 months of age that she'd reacted to just milk initially, but then when we brought her in and she was skin prick tested, she was shown to be allergic to egg as well. And at that point, it was thought that it was very unlikely that children with those kind of allergies would ever have severe reactions. So I was told not to worry about anaphylaxis. But then, unfortunately, when she was 2, she had a really severe reaction to milk in a sausage. So she had a massive chip shop sausage and ended up in ED, and that was the most terrifying experience.
So your daughter nearly died from a chip shop sausage,
which makes it sound horribly dramatic, but actually it's interesting. I've sat in paediatric resuscitation training a few times since then. As you imagine, I've been in the Children's Hospital side for about 7 years, so we do that every year. And every year when they go through the bit about what children look like when they're deteriorating quite rapidly, I get the willies a little bit. because what they described was exactly what was happening with her. I mean, anaphylaxis is one of those terms that it gets used very broadly for the serious side of allergic reactions. So it can be any kind of airway swelling, any kind of breathing difficulty, any kind of signs of low blood pressure. And the majority of the time, even though it's obviously very serious, it's rare that it's actually a truly life-threatening reaction, and a lot of the time they will recover on their own. But with Erin, with that first reaction, she had with the sausage, I mean, it wasn't her first reaction, but it was her first really serious reaction. She'd eaten the entire thing, which, I mean, she was only yay high, and the sausage was this big. At this point, she's, developed an appetite. We were supposed to be going out carol singing with the school. That's why we'd had this chip shop sausage. It was right near Christmas. And she'd ate the whole meal. And then she wandered into the kitchen to me. I was washing up, and she'd got nettle rash, urticaria, all under her neck, which is one early sign of allergic reaction. And within minutes, like a couple of minutes of that, she was covered all over in really intense hives in urticaria, widespread lip swelling. And then I noticed she was wheezing. And at that point, we lived in Bramcote Village, which is approximately 10 minutes away from the hospital. It was a quiet evening. So we shot in the car with her because she'd had bronchiolitis when she was little. So she'd got inhalers and had a tendency to get wheezy. So thankfully we had inhalers and spacers. Drove all the way there with me sat in the back with her, feeding her inhaler all the way there. Walked into ED, which obviously when you walk in rather than coming in an ambulance, you're not naturally sort of siphoned off into the most intense area. I just sat down and tried desperately to make eye contact with a nurse because I knew that it was serious, but you don't want to make a fuss. So I sat there with her on my knee thinking, I think she's a bit sort of bluey coloured. What we would have used the term cyanotic, like a bit bluey in the face. But I didn't want to panic myself, I think as well. So I was trying to keep calm, and I just sort of caught eye contact with a nurse and sort of did this like, look at me, look at her, and she said, do you want to follow me? So she saw what I saw. And then as soon as we were seen in the cubicle, it was just then a sort of catalogue of like one person, then another person, then another person. And I think my memory of all of that is all quite hazy because it's just, some things feel like they took ages. Some things felt like they happened really quickly. But it became clear she was obviously wheezy. They put her on a monitor. They didn't like her oxygen levels. They were umming and ahhing about whether or not to give adrenaline. And while they were having that conversation, I think they got a consultant or certainly a senior registrar there at this stage. She was on my knee and she was quite floppy at this point. And she was thankfully monitored because at that point her dad said to me, what's wrong with her feet? And I looked at her feet and her feet were purple. So she was shutting down. And then I heard the monitor go off and I looked up and her heart rate was spacing out. So she was becoming bradycardic. She was dropping her heart rate. Now, children don't do that normally. They rally very, very, very well. So actually, that is exactly the kind of catalogue of things they describe of children. And they will compensate and compensate and compensate before they get that bad. So I just said to him, get them now. And he just went and grabbed them, and then everything started happening very quickly. She was on the stretcher, she was completely unconscious. They gave her the adrenaline, and her heart rate picked up very quickly. She was certainly a great advert for giving adrenaline rapidly. And then they had real trouble getting a line in her and things like that. But I'd say although it was terrifying, and I remember watching them unclip the little plastic clips off the resuscitation trolley. And sitting there thinking, oh my God, we're going to go home without her. And we've just had because we had a chip shop tea. It still makes me choke up even now. And I sort of relive that a little bit every time I do resuscitation training. I have to have a little word with myself. But, she's now 24. She survived it. Within sort of a very short space of time of that, she was running the length and breadth of a ward full of adrenaline, obviously, at this point, with the little saturation probe dangling off her toe like nothing had ever happened. So that was one of, in the end, 4 episodes of anaphylaxis she had in childhood, because it became clear she was allergic to nuts. And by that point, we were thankfully under the care of paediatrics.
So when did you, let's bring Deborah into this. So when did yours and Deborah's paths cross with regards to the kids?
So what I remember is coming to your house, and before I was going to the playgroups or the school and doing the training there. So I can't remember what age.
No, I don't think I can remember it very accurately.
But I still remember sitting in your house.
Yeah.
And I can remember one of the stories that you told me was when she had a reaction and she'd had a bath or something.
Oh, yes.
And the whatever it was she was allergic to, the milk, say, was inside something. So she didn't have a reaction straight away. I can always remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, because the traces of milk in something is a very different thing to traces in nuts.
It's really hard to know. The difficulty is that trace warnings don't really mean anything. Right. What's in the ingredients is the important bit of information. And we know that a lot of the time where it says may contain traces of nuts, it may well not at all be significant. But milk, obviously, is a much more widely used, dairy, cheeses, all the different things, with milk in, butter, are much more widely used and much more difficult to clean up the traces of. If you think about just wiping down your kitchen side, you can see when the nuts have gone mostly. You might get a tiny bit of contamination, but that possibility of milk contamination is much greater. And so we know things like vegan foods can be mislabeled as where you think because it's vegan, it's going to be dairy-free. But of course, it isn't always completely dairy-free. If they're making things with milk in as well, it might not be completely dairy-free. That and the fact that they change the recipes quite frequently. And suddenly put milk back in, having taken it out. So it gets very confusing. You really have to be a bit more on your toes, I think, with milk. Not that you don't have to be with other things, but it's just it is a difficult food to avoid completely. But we also know, and I remember reading this at the time, that if you ate a food that was very fatty, the fat would coat the allergen and then you wouldn't necessarily react to it until it got all the way into your gut and it broke down. And I think that's particularly true of milk because it's a fat-rich thing in and of itself. So that happened a couple of times where she didn't react till a bit later on. Whereas when she later reacted to nuts, because she then turned out to be nut allergic as well, because why on earth would we keep things simple? That was much quicker. That was really instant. She started chewing it and it was like, oh, something's happening. You could see it in her face straight away, and within minutes we were in a mess. That happened very fast. Milk was always a bit of a slower build-up, really. So, interesting. She also used to just get hives out the blue now and then when she got upset. So that kept me on my toes as well.
I mean, you've kind of hinted at it with, obviously what you've been telling us of your own experiences. But, I mean, it is a point, isn't it, Deborah, that actually allergies they're so much more prevalent now than going back to late 90s time, early 2000s time, which is what we're referring to at the moment. It's way more prevalent. And
well, as I say, when I first started in this post in 1996, I did one EpiPen training in the whole year, and then it just seemed to take off. And I did more and more allergy, and I found the more I learned about allergy, the more complicated it gets, because it is very individual, really, isn't it? So you're never bored. I was never bored doing what I was doing, but it is very, very individual.
Why is it? Why is it more prevalent now?
Well, there's lots and lots of theories. The hygiene theory. We're too clean. We eat foods from all over the world. When years ago, our grandparents and our, relatives gone by, they used to eat things just in season, didn't they? And now we don't. We eat anything we like, whenever we like. And that could be the thing. There was a theory at one point that children's immune systems still needed to get better and better as they were growing. Just lots of different things, but I like to think of the hygiene hypothesis as a big thing, and also prepackaged foods. We went through a period, didn't we, when we would be eating microwave foods all the time, not fresh food, And that was the theory as well. So, and I think children went through a period of perhaps not being as fit as we were. You know, when I was young, we were playing out all the time, and children don't eat dirt, and you know,
and walking everywhere, as opposed to getting a lift.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's lots and lots of theories, and I'm sure they all have
I think it's a combined thing. I mean, the hygiene hypothesis sort of got thrown out a bit.
Yeah.
Hygiene hypothesis meaning that, like, we're all too clean and therefore we're not fighting off enough. And there is definitely a connection between the decrease in, like, infectious disease and an increase in allergic and sensitivity and atopic disease. But it's probably not quite that simple. So I think there's certainly every year at the allergy conferences they talk about skin barriers being different. And we know that eczema and broken skin barrier is a lot of the time how sensitivity happens. So we know that children with eczema, even more importantly, need to widen their diet when they're infants and get these foods into their diet frequently and early in order to avoid becoming allergic. So if you avoid allergens, so the most commonly allergic foods like nuts and fish and eggs and milk and all of those things, until you're older, until beyond a year, your risk of allergy goes up. Your risk is higher if you've got a broken skin barrier, because you meet the food through the skin before you get to actually eat it, and it goes through your gut, and then you develop antibodies that then when you eat it recognise that as the enemy before you've even eaten it. So we know that getting those foods into the diet early is really important in children with eczema, but it is very likely that because of the things we use in our environment, our skin barrier behaves differently. There's also a lot of theory around gut biome, so all the normal friendly bacteria that we had in our gut historically that now is probably quite different, and there's a lot less of it than there used to be, a lot less varied, and that might well be having an effect on the way our gut manages things and as well. And then we probably made things worse. So as I mentioned, when my son was very little, you know, he's now 28, we were told to avoid all the allergenic foods because he'd got some food allergy and that would help him. Actually, the opposite is true. He's very lucky he came through all of that, especially as he had really bad eczema. He came through all of that with only legume allergy. He's actually just recently become allergic to Brazil nuts, but that's a different story.
So this never, for a lot of people, this never ends then, because he's in his 20s now and still finding new allergies. Because I suppose, I mean, I don't know whether it's a misconception, but I guess people think, you know, it's more likely to be children and then you grow out of it. But Debra's shaking her head, no.
You can get an allergic disease at any stage in your life. So, you know, people might have had wheeziness when they were younger and we didn't diagnose it as asthma, say, and then they go through their adulthood and being absolutely fine. And then when they're very old, perhaps they get a bit of an infection or something, and then it triggers off this asthma. But same with eczema, you know, if you've got that tendency.
There's a lot of allergic stuff that turns up when you're very little. I mean, certainly things like milk and egg, they tend to outgrow. Unfortunately, Aaron didn't, but most children do outgrow milk and egg allergy, and wheat and soya, most of them outgrow. The other allergies, they don't so much. Peanut, probably about 20% outgrow. That's out of the others, that's probably the most, especially if it's only peanut. So, you know, most of them are stuck with the others, but you can develop. I mean, certainly we see most nut allergy tends to turn up when they're little. Fish allergies often when they're a little bit older. Shellfish allergy, I feel like that's a bit different. That seems to just crop up at any age. And I'm not sure shellfish behaves like other. I don't know what the evidence is on that, so I'm not going to say it's like.
But they do say it's
hugely evidence-based, but I do think it's different. I think shellfish allergy, I saw a lot of in adults. Don't obviously see it in children much because they don't tend to eat a lot of shellfish. But it would often be older people who'd eaten a lot of shellfish and then suddenly just become allergic and be very upset about it all. So, you know, they do all behave a little bit differently. But yeah, we know that broken skin barriers are an element. We know that, like, you know, hygiene hypothesis probably has a minor part, that the gut biome probably has a part. And I think we made it worse because we told people to avoid things. And what's got out into the community in my time in paediatrics, because I've been here 7 years, is it's got much better since I started in terms of people understanding they need to get these foods into their children's diet early. The bit that hasn't got through so well is that they need to keep these foods in.
Yeah.
So once you've introduced peanuts, the other nuts, fish, things like that, certainly egg and all, you ideally want to be giving it at least 2 or 3 times a week. That was what the research was based on, and that's what shows it reduces your chance of allergy. But it reduces it, it doesn't necessarily completely eradicate it. So even when you do all that, you'll still get some that become allergic, you know.
It's fascinating. And I mean, this conversation alone will be relatable to so many people. And then there'll be those people who are like, oh, I've never had an allergy, I'll be fine, it'll never happen to me. But now, as we're finding out, it could happen at any given time. I love shellfish as well, so I really don't want that to happen to me. Fingers crossed. Deborah, obviously we introduced you and your kind of specialism. You do the community work as well. I think you both do together, don't you? So, I mean, that's I imagine absolutely important, especially going into schools as well and working with the staff. Talk to me a bit about what you do.
So it's education, and it's educating these people, these staff. And what you have to remember as well is teachers often, they go into teaching to teach children, and they're also having to treat children with medical conditions, and they're very common medical conditions. So we want to give them the confidence. We also want to give the parents the confidence, and we also want to give the child the confidence to get to be in school.
I mean, we know that even in medical settings, we're absolutely rubbish at giving adrenaline when we should give it. And I always say that, I'll say in the schools, like, you're never ever going to do any harm by giving it.
Yes.
Even if it was the wrong thing to do. And the first thing you're going to do next is ring an ambulance. It's absolutely fine to use it. Yeah. It's adrenaline. If you're dealing with that situation, you're producing adrenaline, you're giving them a dose of adrenaline. It's a totally safe thing to do. But we're really scared to do it, and I see that when we do it in hospital, where we're all a bit like, oh, do we need to? I've got much braver. Certainly since I've been in paediatrics, at just going, no, we have a child with a wheeze, we know we've caused it. This is when we do food challenges. If we're seeing that, we know it's anaphylaxis, we're going to give the adrenaline. And actually, when we do that, we get them to practice with the auto-injector. I'll try and encourage the parent or the child themselves to do it, So it gives them a chance to have a go with it as well then.
I think one of the differences that I've noticed is that we are much more blunt with our messages. We're much clearer with our messages. Maybe years ago, we weren't quite as clear that actually an anaphylactic reaction, you can die, an asthma attack, you can die. And we are very clear.
Yeah. Actually, the risk of death is very, very low. But when people do die and we look at why, it was invariably that the adrenaline wasn't given, or it was given late, or they got up and tried to walk around, like to meet the ambulance or something, and then it turns out their blood pressure's low. So you give it early, stay still. And then the fourth thing that's risky is that they have asthma that is poorly controlled. So that puts you much more at risk of having respiratory difficulty that is prompted by the initial anaphylaxis and then becomes the major problem. So managing all of these things is really important.
But that is the key. If you get seen and you get it dealt with and you get the care like you and your team give, then it is manageable, as you know from your own children.
Yes, absolutely. And then it's just drumming it into them to. We talk about it as ACE now, don't we? So we encourage them to ACE their allergy. So A means making people aware of their allergy. C means checking foods before they eat them. And E means emergency kit, carrying their emergency kit wherever they go. Just like you would never leave the house without your phone or your keys. It needs to be like muscle memory. Pick it up, always have it in your pocket, and then whatever happens, you're prepared. But they're the things that go a bit awry, especially once you get into your teenage years. You don't want to talk about, you want to tell people that there's something different about you. You don't want to, they might be socially awkward and not want to talk to the staff in the restaurant, or whatever, or when they order a takeaway.
When they kiss.
They can't be bothered to check foods, and they don't want to carry their emergency kit, and it causes all sorts of problems.
But when they kiss...
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you know, I'd not even thought of that.
Chat-up lines will be very different. You do not say, hi, what's your name? You say, hi, what have you eaten?
Not surprisingly, they're quite reluctant to speak to their nurse specialist about kissing. There's usually a slightly horrified look on the face.
Yeah, but I always have to say it. I just feel it's really... Or you say it to the parents and you say, remember, these are the these are the things that you need to discuss.
I love that. Yeah. I think my takeaway from this whole conversation is the kissing bit, and also the fact that you've given me permission not to be so clean in my house.
Daughter's girlfriend do it. My daughter will be sat. We were sat out eating out recently, and she went to have some starter, and she put some butter on a roll, and I said to my daughter, "I'm having butter now." So like they know that they can't kiss them for a while because she's had butter on a roll, you know, and then by the end of the meal that will have gone and she'll be fine, you know, because she'll have cleaned it out of her palate.
But it is really
it just
that's amazing. What is it like now for the two of you? Because Debra's been a very key part of the care, and you've got emotional. So even though we're years on now, still never leaves you that feeling of seeing your very young daughter at the time in ED, you know, and the resus trolley and all the rest of it. What's it like now working together?
We work very well together.
I mean, when I came into paediatrics, it was like a bit of a dream come true, really, because adults, I don't know, there's a lot of things in adult allergy clinic that aren't allergy. In things that need looking after sometimes and giving out lots of reassurance. But when you come into children's, there's far more true allergy. You know, there's a lot of food allergy, which was always my area of interest, not surprisingly. And this is where I felt I could make the difference I really wanted to make because of what had happened to me and mine. And, you know, to be able to come and do that and start working initially with Debra was just fantastic, you know, and what a way to like feel like, because you always felt like a safe pair of hands for mine, and you made all the difference. You made so much difference to me. Like when I went into nursery, I felt that she was safe because you were there and you'd gone in and done the training. So that made me feel safe when I came into this job, you know.
And I think that's the difference. I know that I make a difference. I know that the multidisciplinary team make a difference. And that's what I've really loved about being, you know, my career sort of thing. It is just such an honour to work with people and to make a difference in their life, even if it's a small thing. And even those families that we've had, that you and I have shared, that are very, very complicated, when we make a difference, it's like, wow.
You know, you go home feeling good about your day, don't you?
Yeah.
It's very rare I do a clinic and don't walk away feeling I know I've made a difference.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's not stressful sometimes.
Yeah.
And it is, but the support that we get from our wider team as well, and our consultants. Yeah. And, you know, every member, they are really good. It is a great place to work. It really is.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for sharing what is clearly a passion and clearly very mutual respect for each other. And long may your many years friendship continue beyond work. Thank you for being on the episode. I'll leave it for you to sign off.
Thanks for having us today.
And remember, don't say the Q word.